Hi folks, HR Funk here with a video that I have been waiting very impatiently to bring you, and there's several reasons for that, beginning with it gave me the opportunity to shoot two fine rifles side by side together on the range, and that's always a good thing. And also it gives me a chance to pass on some information about the ammunition that I'm using. And for the ammunition, I need to give you a little bit of a backstory so you understand exactly what you're going to be seeing in the video. Several years ago, I attended a long-range shooting course at Bang Steel in Virginia. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to shoot some Spark Munitions ammunition. And Spark Munitions was an Ohio-based company. I didn't even know that they were relatively close by to where I live, and they were manufacturing this ammunition that I was using down in Virginia. This is 168 grain match ammunition in 308 Winchester, and this is the last of the ammunition that I have from attending that course at Bang Steel. And I safeguard this ammunition because it performed so well in that course, and I keep this around specifically for any long-range shooting applications that I might have. With this ammunition out of my old work rifle, which is a Remington Model 700P, I was able to successfully engage targets out to a distance of 1,200 yards, which really, prior to attending that course, I would have thought was something of a stretch for the 308 Winchester, but this stuff did it. And I was also engaging targets a lot closer than that, from 700 yards to 1,000 yards, and pretty much all in between. And again, this was very, very impressive ammunition. And Spark Munitions, I was not keeping up with what was going on with them after I got back. And of course, I've been doing all sorts of other things, shooting other types of ammunition, other types of firearms, what have you. So a few weeks ago, I was on the House of Pain website, and this was just purely by happenstance, and I noticed down at the bottom of the page there was something that said House of Pain Munitions had acquired Spark Munitions. So now what used to be Spark Munitions ammunition is being produced by House of Pain. How cool is that? In fact, I was at House of Pain not too long after that, and I was able to meet the gentleman who previously was the owner of Spark Munitions. I got to tell him how much I liked the ammunition that I was shooting from when I went to that course. And also I found out, once again, that not only is House of Pain producing the match load, the 168 grain match ammunition, similar to what I used when I went to that course, but they are also producing a 190 grain subsonic load, both in 308 Winchester. So I was able to get one box of each of those from House of Pain for this test, and what you're going to see in the range footage is the shooting that I was able to perform out of both of these rifles with both of these types of new ammunition being produced by House of Pain. Now, a couple of things before we head out to the range. I had one box of each, so 20 rounds of the 168 grain match, 20 rounds of the 190 grain subsonic, and two rifles, so that's 10 shots of each per rifle. I did not have a lot of ammunition that I could spend time refining my zeros and figuring out the exact proper sight correction for different distances, so I had to use what I'll call generic data, or data that is basically the same as I use with the ammunition that I have zeroed these rifles with. If I had more ammunition and there was more time to do those sorts of things, the results that I got when I went to the range would have undoubtedly been better than what you're going to see, but I think you'll agree by the time we get to the end of the video, the results were already pretty darn good. So, we're going to head off to the range in just a moment, and I started out with both rifles at a distance of 100 yards with the 168 grain match load that is now being produced by House of Pain. This has a rated velocity of, as soon as I find it here, 2,580 feet per second. So I was using with this rifle basically the same data that I use with my 168 grain match load, again, that I have zeroed this with. And this rifle is zeroed at a distance of 100 yards. So that made everything pretty simple. With my M14, or what I call sometimes my M21, now truthfully, this is a Springfield Armory M1A loaded. It's not a true M14, it's not select fire. It's not a true M21 because it was not a true M14 to begin with, but I will use those terms sometimes to describe this rifle because that's how I think of it. So if that bothers you, I'll apologize here, I guess. Anyway, this rifle is zeroed at a distance of 250 meters with this Leatherwood Art scope. So I knew at 100 yards I was going to have to do some changes in my hold with this rifle, and I did the calculations and found out from 100 yards it was going to be hitting about 4.5 inches high. So I did have to modify my hold in order to fire at those targets at 100 yards. Anyway, when I got out there, the first rifle that I shot was my bolt action Remington Model 700. This was my project rifle over the winter that some of you are familiar with. From that distance of 100 yards, I've got my Mad Bomber target, and since the Mad Bomber is turned slightly to the left, his left eye is the close eye, and I was aiming at the inside corner of his left eye, which is the path of least resistance for that bullet, and that should induce what's called flaccid paralysis, meaning the bomber just goes limp, does not have any reflexive jerk or anything else to detonate the bomb. So let's see how that 100-yard shot at the bomber went with my Remington Model 700 HRF. And there is the result of that 100-yard shot with my Remington Model 700, what used to be my special purpose varmint, but what I'm now calling my Model 700 HRF. I don't think this shot could have been any more perfect with any rifle or any ammunition. That is right dead where I wanted that bullet to go, and that's right exactly where it went to. So very, very good performance on that first shot with both the rifle and the ammunition. Next, I wanted to try a 3-shot group from 100 yards. And you can't see it with this camera view, but lower on the target, there is a clock face in the front of the Mad Bomber's bomb. And there is a small red second hand. The very middle of it is in the very dead center of the clock face. So I was using that for an aiming point for my 3-shot group. And here's how that went with the 700 HRF from that distance of 100 yards. And there is that 100-yard 3-shot group with the 700 HRF and that new House of Pain 168 grain match load. I added the white thumbtacks just to make the holes a little easier to see. The black holes on the black clock face were not showing up very well on camera, so I did add these. Center to center, this group is right at 3/4 of an inch, so just shy of 3/4 of a minute of angle. And once again, for the first time I've ever shot this stuff, I am very happy with that. So now it was time to try this exact same exercise with the M1A loaded. But as I said, it's going to hit about 4.5 inches high from this distance of 100 yards, or from the distance of 100 yards that I was shooting. So when I was shooting the headshot, I aimed right about here, right at the bottom of the chin, assuming that that was going to put the bullet about 4.5 inches high and have it right where I wanted. Now, the M1A loaded does have a 10 power scope, so I don't have quite the large image as I'm looking through there to be able to get just an absolute perfect hold as I do when I'm shooting the more powerful 20 power scope that's on the 700 SPS. So keep that in mind too as you're looking at some of the results while we work our way through. but I shot the headshot and then I moved down to here and I was looking for something in the body of the target, and I'll change the camera again. I was looking for something in the body of the target that I could use for an aiming point, and this black strap over this piece of dynamite was just about in the middle, left to right, of my bad guy's body, and I'm assuming the shots are going to hit about 4.5 inches high and be right in this area. So we'll take a look at what the results were for that as well. So the next time we come back, we'll look at both the headshot result and the body shot results with the M14. And here are the results of that 100-yard headshot with the M1A. And this is not quite the absolute precision shot that we saw with the Model 700, but I really didn't quite expect it to be. That Leatherwood Art scope is intended to quickly adjust for trajectory at different ranges and get shots on target fast that are accurate enough. For most applications, this shot is going to be absolutely accurate enough to stop our bad guy from whatever he's about to do. Might he have a reflexive jerk? I can't say for sure. I'm not a doctor, but one thing's for sure, he's not going to notice any difference between this shot and the one that I had with the 700. Moving down to the 3-shot group. Now this appears to be off to the right slightly, and maybe it is just a little bit, but keep in mind I was using this aiming point, and I better make this a little bigger so you can see it. I was using this aiming point here, so when we come straight up, maybe just a little bit off. This is about 1.25 inches. In fact, let me grab a tape measure and measure that, so I'll give you an exact measurement on there. And according to my elementary school ruler, that is about 1 3/8 center to center. So just over 1.25 inches. Still, not bad with the M1A. This I was using for a 3-shot group, not so much a tactical shot, so obviously on the body of a bomber, I wouldn't want to shoot his bomb if he's in the middle of a crowd of people or whatever. But as far as the group size goes from that distance of 100 yards, again, not bad at all with the M1A and that new House of Pain 168 grain match load. Next, it was time to move back to a distance of 200 yards, and I'm going to switch targets to a couple of other bad guys, and I'm going to be firing body shots from that distance of 200 yards with each of the rifles, and we'll see how that goes. And here are the results of that 200-yard shooting with the Model 700. And once again, I'll make this bigger so it's easier for you to see. I probably should have put something on these shot holes to make them stand out a little bit more, but I think they're pretty easy to see. I've got two touching right here. This one right here makes the third. These shots are right at 1.5 inches, which works out to 0.71 minutes of angle. So again, staying well sub MOA with the Model 700, and I was extremely happy with that. I was starting to get a little bit of wind. It was a half value wind that was gusting sometimes up to about 5 miles an hour. So if it were a little bit more calm, this group might even be a little bit smaller, but still coming in sub MOA at 200 yards. I can't complain at all with that new ammunition from House of Pain or with the Model 700 itself. And here are the results of the M1A from 200 yards. And I have to make a couple of points about this as I make the image bigger, and you're able to see the shots here right dead center in the heart, here in the left lung, and here in the lower left lung. The group size from that distance is about 4 inches, so about 2 minutes of angle. But with this target, looking through the 10 power scope, I really didn't have any fine aiming point that I could use. What I really like on any sort of a target is something very small that I can aim in, just like when I was using the little red part of the second hand on the clock face. That's the type of thing I like to use for an aiming point. So I was estimating about where the belly button of the target would be, and I can see now that I did not make this big enough. So there we go. I was estimating about where the belly button of the target would be because, again, with the 250 meter zero on the Leatherwood Art scope, the shots were going to hit about 4.5 inches high. It was sort of a mathematical peculiarity that both at 100 yards and 200 yards, I was hitting about 4.5 inches high, but when I did the math at both distances, that was the difference in point of aim and point of impact with a 250 meter zero. So I'm just basically holding down here about where I think the belly button would be, and the shots are going up here, so I'm sure I deviated somewhat in my hold from shot to shot because I just didn't have a real good precise aiming point. So the 4-inch group really is not indicative of the accuracy of this ammunition with this rifle. It's more a limitation of my ability to employ the accuracy because of the lack of a fine aiming point. Now, all that said, I think my bad guy from 200 yards taking either this shot directly through the heart or either of these two into the lung with those 308 bullets is probably not going to be around too long to cause anybody else any more problems. So all of this is relative based on the expectations for the rifle system that's being used and exactly what type of shooting is being done. So now it was time to change ranges and move over to the 300-yard range and see how both of these rifles would perform from that distance with the new House of Pain ammunition. Again, I changed to a different target. Now, as I was moving and I'm getting later and later in the afternoon, the wind was starting to do some strange things. And of course, my distance is getting farther and farther. It was fluctuating from a half value wind to a full value wind, left to right. And the velocity was also fluctuating a lot. It would go from dead calm to about a 5 to 7 mile per hour wind. So I knew it was going to be a little bit tricky from 300 yards to keep my groups close together. So I point that out now because when I get to the target and put that up here, I'm going to talk about my hold and some of the things that I'm seeing on that target from the distance of 300 yards. First up are the results with the Model 700 from that distance of 300 yards, and I've marked the shot holes for the Model 700 with these black stickers. And a couple of things that I want to talk about before we look at the group itself. First off is the group location. As I said at the beginning of the video, I have not shot this ammunition before, so I was not able to refine my sight corrections. I ended up using my normal sight correction for 300 yards that I used with the ammunition that I had my rifle zeroed for. And we can see the House of Pain ammunition is not dropping quite so much at that distance of 300 yards. I would expect the ammunition that I typically use to be in this area here, and it's about half minute of angle high at that distance of 300 yards, which is actually a good thing if we're going to talk about longer and longer range performance with this ammunition. Now when we look at these shots, this was the first shot that I fired, and these were the next two. This group is right at 1 minute of angle. It's 3 inches from that distance of 300 yards. The first shot, however, when I fired it, or I should say prior to firing it, I was looking at the wind, I was watching the mirage through my scope, and I was getting a full value wind, and it was about 5 miles an hour. I could see that mirage moving. So I held my vertical crosshair from my scope right here, about halfway between this darker portion of the center and the outside edge of this square box. So I fired the first shot with the sights in this location. In fact, the horizontal crosshair would have been right about here. And this was where that first shot struck. So I knew I hadn't held quite enough for wind. So for these two shots, I held right on the edge of this line with that vertical stadia. And these two shots are not much more than 1 inch apart. I didn't measure them respectively before I put the stickers on, but they're about 1 inch apart. So I have a 1 minute of angle group, even though I changed my hold. If I had used the same hold for all 3 shots, this would have in all likelihood been a sub-minute of angle group. Again, I'm not upset at all with this type of performance from a distance of 300 yards, but I just want to make sure everyone understands what you're seeing when you look at this group, and you're not thinking to yourself, well, gee, it's not 0.5 minutes of angle or 0.25 minutes of angle or anything else. This is shooting in the real world with wind and light conditions and changing ammunition and changing rifles and having different triggers and all that type of thing. So this is, as I said before, very fine performance as far as I'm concerned. Next up, we have the results of the M1A from that distance of 300 yards, and I marked the shot holes with the M1A, or for the M1A, with the red stickers. And this shot group is a little over 2 minutes of angle, and I have to do some explaining with this too. First off, this was the first time that I had opportunity to change the adjustment cam on the ART scope to actually bring my point of aim in line with my point of impact for the distance at which I was shooting. So once again, I was holding my vertical stadia line right on the edge of this center square here, and my horizontal crosshair was going right through the middle. So the crosshairs themselves would have been just like this. Obviously I'm holding into the wind because I'm still getting that left to right wind. And that ART scope is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It's adjusting for trajectory at that distance of 300 yards and getting shots on target. Now I still have the limitation of the 10 power magnification, and I have the lack of a really fine aiming point. So if that were different, we would probably see a little bit tighter group here. And this last shot, I believe this was the last shot that I'm fired, I'm sure I just caught a wind gust on that one. So this, once again, is shooting under realistic field conditions, and still with the M1A, I'm putting effective shots in the center chest of the target from that distance of 300 yards, and I am very happy with the performance that I'm getting from it, as well as the Model 700 with that new House of Pain ammunition. So now it was time to completely shift gears and try the 190 grain subsonic ammunition. And this has a subsonic velocity rating of 1,030 feet per second. And I tried a shot with this from 100 yards with my Model 700, and the bullet actually went underneath the target. So I'm not suggesting that the bullet would not be effective at 100 yards. If it's starting off with a 190 grain bullet at 1,030 feet per second, I'm sure it's still going to have enough energy to be effective at 100 yards, but I had to move closer to be able to find out exactly what the drop was going to be and what my sight correction would need to be. in order to be able to use this in either one of these two rifles. Also, when I fired that shot at 100 yards, it was so soft shooting that I was fairly certain that it was not going to work the gas-operated system of the M14. So I knew going into it that I was probably going to be physically cycling the action of this rifle when I fired it. So I moved to a different range, started out at a distance of 25 yards, once again using the Model 700 for the first 3-shot group. Then I switch over to the M1A for a 3-shot group. Then I move back to a distance of 50 yards. So I'll show you the footage from all of that shooting. Then when you come back, we'll take a look at the target and see what we can learn from that. Starting out with the results of the Model 700 from that distance of 25 yards. This is the 3-shot group that I fired, and this group measures 3/8 of an inch center to center, so right about 1.5 minutes of angle accuracy from that distance. When I was shooting, I was holding my horizontal crosshair even with the top of the white portion of this target. The drop for this group is almost exactly 2.5 inches, so 10 minutes of angle from that distance of 25 yards. Which is good to know, because if I was going to employ it at that distance, I could simply make a sight correction and raise my sight 10 minutes of angle and then aim dead on and be expecting to have pretty good shot placement. The rifle, as I was shooting it, almost had no recoil whatsoever. The report was very, very soft. I don't know if that came through in the video or not. So if you were going to use this in a suppressed system, I think it would suppress very, very well. I don't have a suppressor, so I can't screw one on and verify that. But all indications are, just based on what I could tell shooting it in a non-suppressed rifle, that this would work very well if you were trying to have the absolute lowest sound signature that you could get. Next up, I was going to shoot it in the M1A, and just as I suspected, there was not enough energy to be able to cycle the action. And let me move the camera and we'll take a look at the group. And here are the results of the first 3 shots from 25 yards with the M1A. This group was about 1 inch center to center. And that's very large from that distance of 25 yards. And I really get the sense the M1A does not like this subsonic ammunition. Now, the M1A does have a match grade barrel, and it has a rifling twist ratio of 1 turn in 11 inches. The Model 700 likes this ammunition a lot better. It has a rifling twist rate of 1 turn in 10 inches. And I've noticed in past shooting that this rifle has a preference for heavier bullets. In fact, some of the most accurate ammunition that I've fired through it so far was that 180 grain Federal match that you saw in the test from several weeks ago, which was hovering right at or slightly below half minute of angle. So because of the rifling and maybe somewhat because of the gas system, the M1A just does not really care for this ammunition. Now, interestingly enough, it was hitting pretty much point of aim, point of impact with that 250 meter zero on the Leatherwood Art scope. So at least I didn't have to change anything to be able to use it from that distance. But again, these results, now obviously, if I was using this from a distance of 25 yards and the shot struck right where you're seeing here, my bad guy, assuming this was a bad guy, is no longer going to be any sort of a problem. But if we're looking at greater distances, if we were going to use this back to 100 yards, now all of a sudden this is going to be roughly a 4-inch group. And if we go much farther beyond that, it's going to get larger and larger. Now, is that accurate enough to be effective at a distance like 100 yards? I suppose it is, but I would prefer it to be just a little bit more accurate, more along the lines of what we're seeing with the Model 700. So now it was time to back up to 50 yards and see how the Model 700 was going to do from there. On we go to the 50-yard performance with the 190 grain subsonic ammunition and the Model 700. And we have that 3-shot group right here. This measures right at ½ an inch, so 1 minute of angle from that distance of 50 yards. Now you might notice a slight shift to the left here. Don't concern yourself too much with that, because I was using this bullet hole from the shots that I fired with the M1A as an aiming point, because I wanted to get a precise measurement to see what the drop was going to be at that distance of 50 yards. This drop is almost exactly 5 inches, so once again 10 minutes of angle drop, the same distance or the same amount of minutes of angle that we saw at 25 yards. So again, a 10-minute of angle correction would be proper to bring this point of aim, point of impact at a distance of 50 yards. So the accuracy is looking pretty good. The drop, now that we know what it is, would be easy to correct for. So all in all, I don't think that's bad performance at all with that ammunition from the Model 700. And finally, we have the last 3-shot group with the M1A from that distance of 50 yards with the 190 grain subsonic ammunition. And from 50 yards, I was holding 2 mils high. I had my second mil dot right here at this point where the white portion of the target changes to the gray portion. So 2 mils high at that distance of 50 yards would put my my horizontal crosshair right here. I made a mark because I measured this to be able to show you the drop. Now keep in mind the M1A does have that 250 meter zero on the Leatherwood Art scope. So the drop from that distance of 50 yards is about 1.5 inches, so about 3 minutes of angle from 50 yards with a 250 meter zero. But you see, these two shots are not great. They're a little over an inch, probably center to center from each other, so a minute of angle-ish from that distance of 50 yards, 2 minutes of angle from that distance of 50 yards. But this shot concerned me, and if you look at the hole here, you can see that's almost the profile of a bullet, which tells me that last shot was tumbling. The M1A really did not like that subsonic ammunition. I would not recommend using it in that type of a firearm. I don't know how it would perform out of an AR, but these are the results that I was getting with the one semi-auto 308 that I had available for me, and I just don't think that it's a compatible mix. However, the results with the Model 700 are not looking bad. We've got groups that are hovering right at 1 minute of angle with about a 10-minute of angle drop from both of those distances of 25 yards and 50 yards. I've got a few rounds of that subsonic ammunition left. As I said at the beginning of the video, I only had one box of each of those types of ammunition. but I've got a few rounds left. I might go out and make another short video and try to make a correction at a distance of 100 yards and see what kind of accuracy I can get from there with the subsonic ammo, but that's going to be the topic of another video. So there you go, folks. That's going to do it for my report on the performance of these two rifles and these two new lows from House of Pain Munitions. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. Also, I want to say thanks to House of Pain for supplying the ammunition used in this video. If you go to House of Pain, you can use my discount code there, which is HRFUNK, and that'll save you some money off your purchase from House of Pain. And don't forget the Target sponsor, folks. Go to Target's online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, and until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.